Money isn't everything, and for some people, it could be the worst thing. While winning the lottery may seem like a dream come true, not everyone who hits the jackpot goes on to live happily ever after. These stories will show you the dark side of winning the lottery that only those who have won can relate to. But how can a good thing become a curse? Abraham Shakespeare. On November 15, 2006, Abraham and his co-worker Michael Ford were on their way to Miami for an overnight food route. After making a couple of deliveries, they stopped at Town Star, a convenience store in Frostbrook, Florida. Michael went inside to buy cigarettes and drinks, and Abraham asked him to get 2 lottery tickets instead of a soda. Abraham handed Michael $2 from the 5 he had, insisting on the tickets. It was when Abraham checked his ticket that he realized he'd won the $30 million jackpot, fulfilling a dream of his. He chose the lump sum option, receiving $17 million before taxes, which amounted to $11 million after deductions. Abraham quickly spent some of his winnings, but the government garnished nearly $9 grand for child support he owed. He then set aside $1 million in a trust fund for his son and made other purchases, including a pickup truck, a BMW, and a $1 million home in a gated community. With plenty of money left, he began to feel generous with helping a lot of people. Many took advantage of Abraham's generosity, but he willingly helped them out. He even lent $63 grand to his former boss, Greg Smith, to prevent his mother's house from going into default. Despite Greg's reluctance, Abraham insisted and even paid the interest himself, ensuring Greg's financial stability. However, Abraham struggled with managing his newfound wealth as he lacked financial literacy and was easily manipulated. 11 months after winning the lottery, he met Dee Moore, who claimed she wanted to help him write a book and manage his money. Despite his initial trust, Dee swiftly gained control over Abraham's assets, including his home and bank accounts, before going on a luxurious vacation. Abraham later realized Dee's intentions were not genuine, especially when he discovered that her company owed him a significant portion of the money he'd loaned out. Dee Moore manipulated Abraham's debts to her advantage, pushing away anyone who owed him money so she could take control. All of a sudden, Abraham disappeared. He couldn't be found, and when his friends became concerned about his disappearance, Dee fabricated stories about his whereabouts, claiming he was on vacation or helping others in need. However, Abraham's cousin grew suspicious and reported him missing to the sheriff's office. Detectives began investigating Dee's involvement, leading to suspicion of her role in Abraham's disappearance. Dee sought help from Abraham's friend Greg, asking him to buy her time to evade suspicion. Despite his initial reluctance, Greg agreed to her request, unaware of the consequences. Dee Moore's manipulation reached new heights when she coerced Greg into impersonating Abraham on a phone call to his mother. Despite Greg's initial reluctance, Dee's offer of $300 convinced him to go along with her plan. She orchestrated the call in a noisy restaurant to prevent Abraham's mother from detecting any inconsistencies. However, Greg's suspicions grew as he noticed discrepancies in the situation, such as Abraham's unusual text messages. When police observed Dee paying Greg for the phone call, they detained him and proposed that he assist in their investigation. Initially hesitant, Greg eventually agreed to cooperate, but he refused to wear a wire during his interactions with Dee. Instead, he devised a clever method using a Red Bull can to conceal a recording device, allowing him to capture incriminating evidence without arousing suspicion. The undercover audio captured on Greg's Red Bull recording device revealed Dee Moore's attempts to manipulate the situation further. She expressed her belief that Abraham would not contact Greg because he transferred all his assets into Greg's name before supposedly leaving town. Feeling pressure from investigators, Dee concocted a story involving a fictional character named Ronald, whom she claimed was a drug dealer threatening her and possibly responsible for Abraham's disappearance. In a desperate attempt to cover her tracks, Dee sought out someone willing to take the blame for Abraham's murder in exchange for money. She even arranged for an undercover officer to play the role of the fall guy, offering him $50 grand to dispose of the body and confess to the crime. Despite the emotional toll of the situation, Greg remained committed to seeking justice for his friend and continued working with the police to bring Dee Dee to justice. Greg successfully convinced Dee Dee to hand over the murder weapon, a Smith & Wesson .38 Special with an integrated laser sight. Dee Dee also disclosed the location where Abraham Shakespeare was buried, leading Greg to a property she owned in Plant City, Florida. There, she pointed out a freshly laid slab of concrete where Abraham's body lay buried. Greg instructed Dee Dee to place a piece of steel on the concrete to mark the spot, ensuring discretion. With this crucial information, police secured the property and prepared for the exhumation of Abraham's body. After more than 9 months since his disappearance, Abraham Shakespeare's remains were finally recovered. Dee Dee Moore was promptly arrested. Police determined that Abraham had likely been shot by Dee Dee during a disagreement over his money. Dee Dee had her ex-husband dig a hole under the pretense of disposing of trash, then dumped Abraham's body herself before covering it with concrete. Despite Dee Dee's attempts to fabricate stories implicating others, including a fictitious character named Ronald and her own son, she was ultimately charged with first-degree murder and faced trial before a judge and jury. Dee Dee Moore was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. During an interview, she maintained her innocence, but suggested she believed Greg had set her up to gain access to Abraham's assets. Despite her claims, evidence pointed to her involvement in Abraham Shakespeare's murder and the concealment of his body under concrete in her backyard. Dee Dee denied any knowledge of Abraham's murder or involvement in concealing his body, instead suggesting that she and Abraham had buried $1 million under the concrete slab. However, investigators found no evidence of money buried in the yard, debunking her story. She later claimed that an imaginary character named Ronald was responsible for Abraham's murder. Meanwhile, Greg Smith returned to his barbershop, reflecting on his friendship with Abraham and the surreal experience of winning the lottery. Based on the tragic outcome of Abraham's lottery win, Greg expressed a sentiment shared by many: the wish that Abraham had never won the lottery, as it ultimately led to his untimely demise. Unfortunately, he wasn't the only one to end up in such a way. Ryan McKechnie. Ryan McKechnie was a 31-year-old father of 3, and before anyone knew his name, had battled chronic drug addiction for years. However, he'd hoped to turn his life around after winning £40,000 in the Irish lottery in 2012, which translates to about $50,000 US. Tragically, one day his body was found at his home, with sources indicating he'd suffered stab wounds. So, what happened? There seemed to have been a struggle with drugs way before the win, as Ryan's partner, Anne Marie Rooney, had passed away 4 years prior, with her death presumed to be drug-related. She died just 8 weeks after giving birth to their youngest child, Michael. So when Ryan died, the dilemma of who was going to care for the little Michael and his older siblings, Ryan Jr. and Shannon at the time of Ryan Sr.'s death, became a concern. Ryan had managed to stay off drugs for years, but unfortunately relapsed after his mother's death, according to his neighbor Kevin McKenna. So the theory might have been that he got into debt just to satisfy his addiction and got jacked for it. But how could that have been possible with him being admitted to a rehab facility? Another side to the story was also that he was in a jail facility in Ontario when his death happened from a drug overdose. His family knew, and his sister Amy had hopes that her brother would be protected from drug-related crimes in jail, but that didn't happen. Aside from Ryan, a couple of other inmates at the Barton jail passed away, including Paul Debian, Brennan Bully, and Johnny Sharp, whose family and friends participated in the rally Amy organized to question the government about the safety of inmates. Of course, Amy had the right to question the government, but who was going to answer? Well, the 37-year-old man behind the murder did. He was arrested and charged with murder in connection with Ryan's death. And we never got to know his name. Gregory Birch Jr. In 2015, Gregory Birch Jr., a 20-year-old forklift operator from Fitzgerald, Georgia, bought a quick pick ticket at H&R Food Mart, winning $434,000 in the Georgia lottery. Excited but shocked, he received his check the next day and snapped a photo with it. He had quite a plan to spend his money wisely, and so his first act was to help his girlfriend Jasmine, his mother Leslie, and buy Christmas gifts for those in need. However, just 2 months later, while at home with his family, 3 masked men barged in, demanding money. Despite his pleas, they threatened him in front of his children and girlfriend. They received his bank card, and that's when they shot him several times in both legs. One of the men went through Gregory's girlfriend's purse and took her cell phone, wallet, and 2 cell phones that belonged to Gregory. The 3 men ran out of the house and tried to drive off using Gregory's phone. But that's when something shocking happened. Without any warning, one of the masked men came back inside and shot Gregory in the chest, finally killing the 20-year-old. Gregory's girlfriend ran to a neighbor who had just arrived home. She started frantically knocking on the car window, begging to be let into their car. Seeing her distress, they unlocked their back door and Jasmine got in. The neighbor asked her what was wrong, and she told them, "They just busted into my house and they shot my boyfriend." The neighbor took Jasmine down the road and dialed 911. Jasmine had both of her kids with her, but then remembered that her other baby was still in the house, at the back of the house asleep. She went back to get her 3rd baby, and the neighbor then took them to a nearby store. It took only 2 months before police received enough tips to identify the suspects. In total, 6 people were arrested in connection with Gregory's death. In March of the same year, Wayne Jordan were found guilty. He received 2 consecutive life sentences plus 15 years for murder, home invasion, and gun charges. Despite his defense attorney's attempt to appeal to Georgia's Supreme Court, the appeal was rejected. During the trial, a woman testified that all 7 of them would make jokes about the shooting, and Wayne Jordan would laugh about it as they divided the proceeds from the robbery, which included Gregory's wallet. When DeBrantis Overstreet was found guilty on all 14 charges in June 2017, it was based on substantial evidence. The court revealed that DeBrantis had initiated contact with Way and the other suspects to plan the robbery of Gregory. Initially hesitant, Way eventually agreed to participate, aiming to redeem himself from a previous drug theft from gang members. After the 7 gang members left the scene for Rosalind to testify in court, she admitted that she complied out of fear for her safety. She stated that DeBrantis instructed her to carry out several tasks during the crime. According to Rosalind's testimony, DeBrantis called her on the night of the crime to pick him and another person up after he'd killed Gregory. After picking up her boyfriend, he confessed to shooting Gregory 9 times. Ernest Holcomb pleaded guilty to 2 counts of armed robbery, violation of street gang terrorism, and escape from the Ben Hill County Jail in October of 2017. He received a 20-year sentence for armed robbery, with 15 years to be served without parole, along with 10 years concurrently for gang violation, and 5 years concurrently for the escape. Next is a rags to riches story that didn't end well. Amanda Clayton. Amanda Clayton, a 24-year-old single mother from Detroit, Michigan, experienced a tragic turn of events after winning the grand prize of $1 million on the state lottery's game show Make Me Rich on September 11, 2011. There have been few cases of people opting for an annual payment of their prize money, but Amanda was still among the general percentage of those who asked for the lump sum. After receiving her win and paying taxes, she received just over half of the prize money, which was around $500,000. However, Amanda made a decision that put her in a controversial light. A local news station got info that revealed that despite winning the lottery, she continued to receive welfare benefits without reporting her winnings, as required by state law. This sparked outrage among taxpayers who felt that she was taking advantage of the system. In an interview, Amanda defended her actions, stating that she still needed assistance despite her lottery winnings. However, the statement only fueled further criticism. Eventually, she was charged with welfare fraud in July 2012 and sentenced to 9 months probation, along with being ordered to repay the amount of assistance she had received, totaling around $5,500. The tragic end of Amanda Clayton's story came just 2 months later, when she was found dead in her home, a possible victim of a drug overdose. Whether it was accidental or intentional remains unconfirmed. Family and friends attributed her death to cyberbullying and the stress caused by the charges brought against her by the state. It was also possible that Amanda was ambushed in her home by some angry mob of taxpayers who still felt like she owed more than she'd paid off. She was only 25 years old when this happened. Strangers may have attacked Amanda, but it was nothing compared to what a family would do to its own blood. Aruj Khan. Aruj Khan was a 46-year-old man from India who moved to Chicago, Illinois in the late 80s. He was said to be a very hard-working person and liked by many people. He owned a string of dry cleaners and real estate. He was married for 12 years, living in a nice home in the north of Chicago, and had a 17-year-old daughter from his first marriage. He was living a great life, but he just had one problem. He was addicted to scratch-off lottery tickets, and he would buy a lot of them. In one instance, he spent up to $600 in one day in just scratch tickets alone, and sometimes he would end up winning hundreds, even thousands. But in June of 2012, Aruj bought 2 scratch tickets. The first ticket was not a winner, but when he got to the second ticket, that's when he hit the jackpot. He won $1 million. Friends of his said that he was excited about claiming his money because of the number of good deeds he could do with it. But a month later, before he could even see a penny, Aruj suddenly died. In July of 2012, Aruj was eating his dinner that his wife made him. Less than an hour later, he went straight to bed, and suddenly, his wife woke up to him screaming in agony. She called 911 and was suddenly rushed to the nearest hospital, but it was too late. Aruj Khan was pronounced dead. The doctor has said that he died of natural causes, but a week later, the Cook County Medical Examiner's office got a call from his nephew. The authorities had found a lethal amount of cyanide in his blood, turning the case into a homicide investigation. His nephew said that he believed someone had tried to kill him once he and the rest of the family were told of the amount of cyanide that was in his blood. Aruj's brother filed a petition to a judge asking Citibank to release information about Khan's assets to ultimately ensure that Aruj's daughter receives her fair share of the lotto money. His siblings had pursued legal action to protect their niece's share of her late father's estate. Aruj didn't have a will. His 32-year-old wife, Shabana Ansari, got an attorney and was questioned by authorities and said she had nothing to do with her husband's death. His brother and sister had won a court order to freeze the lottery winnings after his wife cashed a check in July. Shabana got a total of $425,000. The check was issued on July 19th by the Illinois Comptroller's Office, then mailed. The spokesman for the Comptroller's Office said that it was cashed on August 15th, but he didn't know who cashed it. The judge had then approved Shabana's competing claim as an administrator of the estate. His siblings had questioned if the two were even legally married, but Shabana's attorney said that she does have a marriage certificate from India and that it's valid here in the US. When asked about Aruj's siblings questioning their marriage status, Aruj's wife simply stated that she didn't care about their opinions. She expressed missing her husband dearly and thinking about him every day, but declined to comment on cashing the check or removing any assets. Authorities also had suspicions about Aruj's father-in-law due to his outstanding taxes, totaling over $120,000 at the time of Aruj's death. However, both his wife and father-in-law denied any involvement in his death. Aruj's sister was granted guardianship of his 17-year-old daughter, and she fondly recalls memories with her brother whenever she sees her niece. Despite Aruj's siblings not petitioning for a share of his estate, which includes an estimated $1.5 million, it came as no surprise, because his family had already possessed the assets totaling $1.2 million from lottery winnings, real estate, a laundry business, and automobiles. But in the end, Aruj's estate, including the lottery check, was divided between his wife and daughter. Check out this next story about a family-oriented man who made a wrong choice. And no, it wasn't playing the lottery. Gerald Muswagon. Gerald Muswagon was born on July 9, 1963, in Norway House to Louis and Matilda Muswagon, and they relocated to Winnipeg at the age of 17. Despite the move, he remained deeply passionate about hunting. He tied the knot with Virginia Marlene, a tiny Janai, but over time, he accumulated a substantial criminal record, a trend his family attributes to a lack of education and community support, as well as the negative influence of his social circle. Gerald Muswagon's life changed in 1998 when he won a whopping £10 million in a lottery jackpot. He bought a $2 ticket and hit the jackpot, making his dream come true. But what seemed like a fairy tale soon turned into a nightmare. Instead of using his winnings wisely, Gerald went on a spending spree. He bought fancy cars, a big house that became a party spot, and lots of expensive gifts for his friends. Rumors started spreading that he was spending his money on alcohol and drugs. Despite his newfound wealth, Gerald's life started to spiral out of control. He struggled to handle the pressure and the sudden fame that came with his winnings. Eventually, the stress became too much to bear, and 7 years after his big win, Gerald tragically took his own life. What started as a dream ended in tragedy for Gerald Muswagon and his family. He didn't have the right guidance from those around him. Instead of making wise decisions, he found himself surrounded by people asking for favors and making demands. In an attempt to turn his life around, Gerald started his own business called Gerald's Logging. Unfortunately, the venture failed, and he went back to partying. His reckless behavior led to trouble with the law, including a high-speed police chase in his Chevy Silverado, landing him in jail for 3 months. Tragedy struck again when his wife passed away, leaving Gerald to care for their 6 children. Struggling to make ends meet, Gerald pleaded guilty to sexual assault charges and served another 3-month sentence. By then, he had spent most of his lottery winnings and had to work to support his family. He picked up manual labor work at a local farm, but struggled with depression. 7 years after his life-changing $10 million jackpot win, Gerald's story went from riches to rags, and then finally death when he took his own life in his parents' garage. His lawyer, Tim Valgertson, revealed that Gerald had a hard time adapting to his newfound wealth, especially coming from a background with limited education in Norway House. How sad it must have been for his children who once had wealthy parents. When all attempts to be modest fail, what else could be blamed? Doris Murray. A woman who won $5 million in the Georgia lottery in 2007 was suddenly found stabbed to death in her home. Doris Murray, as she was popularly known, had no idea her life was about to take a tragic turn when she was killed at the age of 42 in eastern Lawrence County. Apparently, she was killed by her boyfriend, Derek Lorenzo Stanley, a 51-year-old who seemed to be more interested in the money than she. Despite winning $5 million in the Georgia lottery in 2007 on her 41st birthday, Murray continued to live modestly. She tried her best to do everything right and not end up like other lottery winners who had met sad ends too quickly. She just remained true to her modest lifestyle, opting to receive $175,000 annually after taxes, rather than a lump sum when she won $5 million in the Georgia lottery. Her plan was to create a trust fund for her grandchildren with most of the money. Even when her home was damaged in a fire, which the cops believed was accidental, she still had plans to rebuild her house, rather than sell it off and buy a new one. But that plan never materialized. Tragically, Murray was killed by her boyfriend in May 2008, leading to a police chase involving her boyfriend, Derek Lorenzo Stanley. Her family were the one to call 911, reporting that they had seen Stanley fleeing with blood on his face. Investigations revealed that Murray and Stanley had been in a romantic relationship, and for some reason that Stanley could have sworn he had no idea of, Murray wanted to end it and just remain friends with him. But Stanley struggled to accept this, and it led to a violent confrontation where Murray was stabbed multiple times. Stanley was charged and later found guilty of malice murder. In 2017, he appealed his convictions, claiming that Murray had stabbed him during their struggle. However, police found a knife in Stanley's vehicle, contradicting his statement. For each of these stories, something seemed to have stood out. The danger of having too much, more than they could control. Do you think they shouldn't have played the lottery at all? Or should the lottery prize money be reduced? Let's discuss in the comments. Like and subscribe to this channel for more videos.